You're listening to If These Woods Could Talk, produced by the Rhinelander District Library. If these woods could talk, they might tell you a whole bunch of stories, and like at the drop of a hat too, and just go and go because they love it and because they can. Tales of the Northwoods, Echoes from Rhinelander's Past is the title of 2 volumes of lore collected and published in 2002 and 2004. Now, after 21 years of living life, author Mark Miazga has brought us a 3rd collection of stories. He stopped by the library recently to talk about storytelling, his background, and some of his outlook on life and what really matters in history. Tales of the Northwoods Volume 3 will soon be available at the Hodag Store and online at hodagpress.com.
My name is Mark Miazga. I grew up in Rhinelander. My parents a long time, been here forever, big families. And what are we doing? We're talking about oral history, Rhinelander history.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
So you grew up here.
Yep.
There's Miazga's around.
There's a few, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to start from the start?
Yeah. So I was born in 1968, and my dad was almost 50. He had been born and raised on the west side. He worked in the paper mill for 40 years, and my mom was a labor delivery nurse at the hospital. Both big families, so like I said, we always knew the happenings. And what happened for me is once I got to grade school, I knew all these stories like this, the FBI coming to Rhinelander for the Dillinger shootout and renting Isidore Tucholsky's car because it was souped up and could go 100 miles an hour. I knew all that stuff. There was a semi-pro state championship minor league baseball team here in the 1920s. One of the guys would go on to play in the majors. Another one would play with Ted Williams. And I thought everybody knew that stuff. And then when I got to school, most of my friends, their parents were considerably younger. So I would tell them this, and they'd be like, come on, Miazga, you know. And so when I got a little older in my late 20s, I thought, well, somebody's got to write this down and preserve it. And I realized that's probably going to have to be me because I was young, I was full of energy, and I was able to interview old-timers, especially about my favorite chapter from my first book, The Hobo Jungle Behind the Paper Mill.
Yeah.
It was such a unique time in history. You had, they called them bums, but they were just people trying to get out from under their parents to make their parents' lives less burdensome, one less mouth to feed. And they were traveling the country looking for work, and they had this unique subculture where they would go and ask grocers for food, and they'd put it in a big pot and make community soup with vegetables, onions, meat if they were lucky, and they'd cook it up. They kept a razor in the jungle to shave and a mirror and in case they got a job interview. And a lot of them would go west to pick apples out in Washington, and the northern states tended to treat them quite well. The southern states a little less well. But even the local chief of police, Maurice Straub of that era, who was actually a relative of Mike Skubals, he felt they were harmless. Everyone I interviewed felt they were harmless. My father even would go down there. He didn't tell his mother, but he would go down and talk to. There were a lot of Polish guys down there in my family. My dad was all Polish, and they would speak Polish, and my dad could understand a little of what they were saying, and they all had nicknames. So anyway, so those are the stories I grew up with. And like I said, once I got out of school and started working, I thought, well, I'm going to do it. I'm really glad I did. And then I raised a son who's I'm very proud of, a 21-year-old named after my dad. And now that he's making his own way in the world, I found myself with a lot of time. And I was no longer involved in a lot of the civic stuff I was doing in my community with city council. And I talked to Bill Venkus last February. When are you going to write that 3rd book? And I don't know why, but that got me up I had, collected papers and stuff over the years. Oh, I should write about this. So I had some stuff to go on. I knew I wanted to write about West Side Park. Great story of, if you've ever heard of Larry Stiza, he wrote an article in Our Wisconsin about how the West Side boys had to build their own baseball diamond and maintain it.
Okay.
And they had borrowed some fencing from the United County Highway Department out on 8 and put all that in. And long story short, it's a bunch of 8, 9, and 10-year-olds ultimately made city policy because the city council was, in a sense, ultimately guilted into building a park because we were the only part of the community that didn't have a park.
Sure.
So those are the stories. And I graduated in 87, went to college in Eau Claire, and then went to law school. And I've been working ever since. I work at the University of Minnesota, but these last 6 months have been phenomenal. Just late nights. I've had Saturdays where I get up at 8 and I'm poring over clippings and I'm writing it, and I'll go till 2 a.m. My wife will say, "You need to go to sleep." I'm like, "Oh, but I just got these new photos of St. Mary's Hospital, and I found out about how they cared for lumberjacks, and they were there when the change occurred between midwives delivering babies at home and women beginning to deliver babies in a hospital." And it is fascinating. There's so much history, and if you take the time to look, you can find ties to state history, national, let alone American Indian history, and the confluence of the Pelican, Wisconsin, being a gathering point for centuries, and the mass graves they found behind the hospital when it was built, which was likely evidence of a battle. I mean, think about that. Like, it's not just the history you learn in school of, some very wealthy industrialist creates the big industry, and then that's what you hear about when you're growing up. And history's about the people that made stuff happen. It's about the working people, the people that work for 40 years and they coach Little League, and they keep the community safe, and they pay their taxes, and they look after their neighbors. That's the people who make history, in my opinion. So that's a nutshell of what makes me tick around Rhinelander history.
All right. So who was the big storyteller when you were little?
My dad, 100%.
Dad, okay.
Yeah, he was a Depression-era kid. Parents didn't have can I say this? A pot to piss in or a window to throw it out is what they would say of that era. My grandpa got blown up dynamiting a stump in a sugar camp. It wasn't uncommon, these cut-over farms, they called them. So she raised 8 kids somehow, did a darn good job of it. They all were people who contributed to the community. But yeah, everywhere we went, he would point out stone basements on Maple Street and talk about the masons that built them and what an amazing thing that was. And it's too bad there's not more of it. And he would point to the paper mill and talk about the various history of the machines. He was on city council and county boards, so he obtained history there. He knew some of the history of how the names of the streets up toward going out west of town on Maple River Street, where they got their names. And it just tied me to all these great stories and a deep appreciation of the people that came here before and helped create our parks. I mean, one thing, he didn't tell me this one, but he had a passion for community. I mean, he was part of the sports club that originally put in boat landings because they could see that access to the lakes was getting purchased by a lot of wealthy people, and that eventually the working folks would be cut off from access to the lakes. I mean, he was doing that back in the 30s and 40s, and the sports club has changed their focus since those days, but yeah, he had a story for everywhere. Hanson Lake, he used to hike out onto the railroad tracks to do all his fishing for miles in either direction, either out past Town Line Lake. He was the one who told me there was a prisoner of war camp at Hugo Sauer Nursery, so of course I looked that up. There it is, 1945 articles. And then Betty Cowley wrote Stalag, Wisconsin, and talked about Camp Rhinelander. And of course he knew a lot of sports history because he was friends with a gentleman named John Kotz, who led Rhinelander to its last state basketball championship, and then led UW-Madison in 1941 to its only ever national basketball championship. Was All-American, All-Conference, And again, more importantly, a good person, a community person who gave back. When he would go to the golf course in the morning, he would bring a dozen donuts for the people working, for the people doing the sprinkler systems and the wait staff and those folks. He never forgot who he was or where he came from.
Yeah.
So, Dad was a storyteller. Mom was much more introverted. She had a serious job bringing babies into the world. When she would tell me the stories, I'd be like, nope, I'm not going to be working with blood or serious stuff. Life's serious enough, right? But yeah, she had an amazing career and was an amazing person. But Dad was the storyteller, the one that it was awesome. Life was always a joy. You always had something to think about. I don't care if you're from a town of 50. There's stories out there.
Mm-hmm. So when did Tales of the Northwoods, Echoes from Rhinelander's Past come about?
Oh, about 1997 or 8.
Okay.
It started as I had all these ideas written down: the hobo jungle, city hockey, the history of Highway 17, it being an old Indian road originally, like a lot of highways, and then becoming a tote road for transporting supplies up to the sawmills.
Can I ask, what do you mean by old Indian road? What?
So most highways in the United States, if you look at really, really old maps, were originally Indian transport roads that Indians used to, if they weren't using canoes and using the rivers as the highways, they had land routes connecting various villages, settlements, good hunting and fishing spots. And they were usually just paths through the woods. But the original highway, so following that, people that settled middle to upper Wisconsin, they would transport things to sawmills in the early days down by Berlin, Wisconsin, and then eventually up to Stevens Point. But this area above Stevens Point was still wild in the mid-1800s. So they had to have a way, as they started to have the timber cruisers would go up the river and report back that, hey, there's all this virgin timber up there we have to get at. And they needed a way to get up there, and you couldn't transport a lot of building goods, wood and roofing and things like that on a canoe. So they wanted to build something, and they would expand those Indian roads into tote roads so that a horse could get through there and carry what was needed. And ultimately, when the Civil War came about, there was a big argument to expand. I think it was the northern part of 17. It was either 17 or 45, or where they come near each other, to make it a military road. The argument being that Canada was still loyal to Great Britain, who was somewhat loyal to the South. And the lumber barons of the time saw that as also a good time to make an argument of, that really makes sense. Let's have the taxpayers build that road, even though privately they were going, and then we can push more of our product up those highways, and we don't have to pay for it. So, it's a unique history. It's not. I don't mean to have an opinion on it, but it's just interesting to see how things come into play. Where on the one hand, the history says military road. It was about the Civil War. Oh, and it happened to benefit the lumber barons of the time.
Confluence of interests.
They might have been lobbying for it in D.C., So, so that's how that came about. I did a lot of research. In those days, it was still early internet, so I came to your very location here at the library. Spent a lot of hours going over microfilm and taking motion sickness tablets because I get that easily. Lots of paper, lots of late nights. State Historical Society was great. The Ashland, Wisconsin branch of I think it's a State Historical Society. I found good stuff there. Mostly hand wrote it. That's my process. Yep, I like to handwrite it and then type it, and then think about the footnotes and the actual bibliography and doing that correctly. But the research was meant to validate the stories. I love my dad, and they were all true. But nonetheless, I wanted to do the research, find the newspaper clippings, find books, interview people. And this is where I met Eldor Huebner. and a couple other people who said, "Oh, I'd be happy to talk to you." And then Eldor told me about walking by the Phillip Street Bridge and seeing the bums down there with their hobo stews and stuff. And that was fascinating. And then as a plus, I'd go home, and my dad was pretty ailing and sick in those days. And I'd say, "Oh, I met Eldor Hebner," and he'd scribble a note, "A longtime employee of Schooley Forbes." And of course I'd go, "What's Schooley Forbes?" So I'd look that up, and it was a hardware store that was back when downtown Rhinelander, that's where all the shopping was done. So, and then Kurt Kortenhoff with Long Live the Hodag, he was amazing. He runs Hodag Press, and at the time he worked at the Minnesota History Center in St. Paul. I worked just down the street, literally like quarter mile at the Ramsey County Courthouse.
What luck.
Yes, so we would meet at McGovern's Tavern, and I would tell him what I want to do, and he'd say, "Okay, I can help you," because he knew the I can research and write till the cows come home, but Kurt knew how to design a cover, and he knew what it took to get an ISBN number and all this other stuff. And he was very flattering. By the time we got done, he said to me, "I never met somebody who said they were going to do something, and then they just methodically did it step by step." And I was like, "Really?" And I try to stay humble about that because it's a compliment, but for anyone with ADHD, one of the things they do really well is hyperfocus.
Okay.
And that's me for sure. I mean, after I talked to Bill Vankus on Friday and got going on this, there was no stopping me. I mean, like I said, 12-hour days on a Saturday just going wild on research. And I know it sounds geeky, but you got to know who you are, and I think it's the best way you can make an impact on the world is use your gifts, and hopefully these books put a smile on people's faces, and I might never know they do, but that's okay. That's not why you write. It's certainly not to make money, I can tell you that.
Believe that. So if you started around, what'd you say, 98?
98. Yeah.
So it was published in 2002, is that right?
Yes, 2002,
so
October.
About a 4-year process of researching, and you have tons of footnotes at the end of, or endnotes rather,
That's
after
right.
each chapter. So the research is really evident.
Thank you.
Yeah, putting in the time. But so 4 years, and then Volume 2 came out in 2004.
Yep.
So did you refine your process? Did you find more time? How did you?
So what happened is we knew we wanted to start a family, and I knew after that there wouldn't be much time to follow these passions. So what happened too is I got a lot of ideas. Once I wrote the first book and talked to a lot of these folks, people would say, "Oh, you know about the Hornet hockey teams of the 1950s? They won 3 state championships." And I'd say, "Yeah, my dad told me about them." And people would say, "Well, you should talk to the old timers while they're still alive." So I interviewed like Delore Doe, who owned Pat Doe's, and Pooch Cheslock, who worked at the paper mill and was a pretty good athlete, and sat down with those guys, and then they had pictures. So in terms of the process, the second time around, I think I knew better how to write, because the first time around, I'm an okay writer, but my sister at the time, Vicki, was she had been editor of the Lakeland Times in Minocqua for many years, so she was an actual writer, and she edited. She looked at my work and she edited it, and then Kristen Larson helped me edit it as well. And one of the things I learned is, wow, I'm not perfect, and there's a lot of stuff around grammar and punctuation and semicolons and the Oxford comma that I hadn't thought of. And more importantly, Vicki said, "Your writing style is more like having a barroom conversation, like with somebody next to you." And I said, "That's exactly what I'm after. I'm not wanting this to be hyper academic. I don't want it to be a treatise that's 200 pages on one topic. It's meant to be 10 to 20 minutes. Remember these days, I knew this person. I had no idea this was a thing." And especially for people who've moved here and don't know the history, to go, whoa, the ties to the one-handed push shot, a woman who played professional women's basketball in the 30s, the hobo jungle, the success of the hockey team, or in my new book, a photographer whose wild orchid photography got international acclaim, was published in 2 Who's Who of photographers. And the gentleman who eventually donated the land for the Holmbo Nature Preserve that we all love today. So, people like that, we need to take a moment to thank them, and that's also what I'm trying to do. So that book, I think the refinement that I learned was a humbling of you're still going to need someone to edit this damn thing. So I again had people edit it.
Okay.
The data collection became easier because I had more people in the community, not a lot, but 3 or 4 that would send stuff to me. Kristen would do research here, so I didn't have to drive from St. Paul every weekend. That was super helpful. Kevin Norton, good friend of mine from grade school, helped me a bit, especially I think he was in school at Madison at the time, and he would go to the State Historical Society for me and pull up stuff on Rhinelander.
That would be nice to have.
It's nice to have allies. And so, yeah, for that one, I got a lot of help in that way. I knew what the process is, again, just methodical. The research is the fun, free-spirited, because you can go look at everything, books, now internet, newspaperarchives.com, newspapers.com, talk to people here Bill Vankus is amazing. Bill from I know we're on the second book, but people are just so helpful. They want to help you. And every now and then you'll get really lucky and someone will have old photos to share.
Sure.
So that second one went pretty smoothly. I got it done in late summer of 2004. My son was born in April. So I still remember our basement in that house didn't have heat, and typing, and my hands would get so damn cold.
Oh, no.
But I wanted to finish this thing because I knew I was going to start not getting a lot of sleep with a new baby. And I got it out by October of 2004. He was 6 months old. And after that, it was just the marketing and the fun part, presenting, talking to people. The fun parts for me are the research and the writing. I'm not very good at design, so I'd hire someone to do the cover design, the typesetting, and then the back end is also fun. This, marketing it, coming to the community, talking to people on WXPR and other places, and then after that book, I knew I wasn't going to get the chance to write, and those were my priorities. I think the most important roles we play are those of being a child to our parents, a caregiver to them when we get older, a father if you choose to be a parent, a neighbor, etc. To me, it's not all about career. I think we play a lot of roles in life. I think career is maybe number 4 or 5. I mean, to me, you'd be a good father, husband, friend, neighbor. Career is great, but I don't think it should be number 1. I never wanted to be that guy that spent so much time chasing money that his kid grew up and was like, oh, it'd have been cool if you took me to see trains or to a Brewer game or something. So that's what I spent those 20 years doing. And it's just been in the last couple that I've kind of gone, oh, he's grown up. He's got all these friends. This is exactly what you want. He's a good kid. He's pursuing a great trade and saves his money, and he's mature and he's good to his parents, and kind of going, what do I do now?
So you gave birth to a new kid. Volume 3.
That's right, exactly. And I'll thank Bill Vankus a ton, because Bill's been trying to persuade me to do something every time I see him. And February was really when I went, you know what? It's the middle of winter. I don't have anything to do. I'm going to just start writing this chapter on West Side Park, because I had some data. And I'm going to write on Helen Onsen, and I forget what the third one was that I had data on. Fast pitch tournament that I was talking about earlier. So I started down those 3, and then I had this list I had kept track of for years, including ideas from Kristen. And I was looking at them, and once I discovered newspapers.com and newspaper archives, I went, holy cow, each of them covered gaps the other ones didn't have. Certain years where the other one didn't cover Rhinelander Daily News or the Our Town or the New North. And I forget which chapter I was researching. I was like, there's a ton of stuff here. One of the big ones was there was a internationally known ventriloquist here named Harry Lester. And I mean, big time. He was as good as somebody named Edgar Bergen, who was on national TV, radio. But Bergen was the good performer, but Lester was the better technician, and he taught Edgar Bergen. And so I heard this idea from Mike Skubal years ago, and I started researching him on the newspaper sites, and suddenly I was pulling together this amazing story of someone who immigrates from Poland, falls in love with ventriloquism, starts performing, learns the details of it, the intricacies. I started learning about vaudeville and him performing in Europe, falling in love with a woman from Rhinelander, staying here because he loved the community, riding this unicycle through town. I mean, he was an eclectic person. My favorite people who are comfortable in their skin. Mm-hmm. Be who you are and do those hobbies that you love. I mean, be yourself. So he was definitely himself, and he would play jokes on people. And the most important thing that really made me go, okay, I got to write about this guy. In 1930, there was no playground equipment apparently for the kids of Rhinelander. There were parks, places to play baseball and stuff. So they had a fundraiser, and he was the primary performer. And there was so many famous people that spent time up here, and he knew some of them, and other people knew them. And then you had Joe Mercedes, who was here, who was pretty well known as a performer. So Lester helped get all these people together at the State Theater for this performance that raised money for the original equipment in Rhinelander. And he loved kids, and he did a lot of philanthropic things. And I thought, this is the kind of person, again, we need to take a moment when we're walking around these great parks we have in the community and say, this stuff doesn't happen magically. There's people that move it and make it happen. And then when I was thinking about the fame of those people, I was like, they'd be like today having, I don't follow movies much, but if you had a performance and say George Clooney or fill in the blank, The Rock came to Rhinelander for a fundraiser for the parks, people would be like, what? But that's the kind of notoriety these people had, and the kind of soul they had to want to benefit the community. So that started, like I said, 6 months ago, and because I had refined the process so much, it was just after work, okay, dishes are done, dinner's in the stomach. I can't wait to dive into fast pitch, and then I'd go through that, start another one, and then what would happen is I would have other emails out on other chapters. So I think I was done with one, and then Todd Johnson, who's a realtor here, would say, oh, Mark, I have this thing for you. I'm like, oh, I guess I better go back to that chapter. Or I would think I had something cited correctly in the footnotes, and I would read some article that was different that said, no, you should put the comma here and the semicolon here. And those weren't the funnest moments by any means, but the chapters were fun. I'm trying to think. The moonshine one was a struggle for me because I'd always wanted to write about it. My dad used to talk about on Pelican Street, this neighbor ran moonshine down to Amos and Andy. He was a driver. This guy on the end of Davenport Street where it met 47 was a farmer who had a big still near the tracks, and one other family that he knew. And I thought, this was just everyday life for him. Yeah. People would be like, oh yeah, that's the old such and such farm. So I had always thought that would be tied up in court records, buried in some dusty old basement of the courthouse, and it would take way too long for me to get anything written. Again, newspapers.com and archives, I simply ran moonshine 1919 to 1933 during Prohibition, and Rhinelander. They published everything then.
Yeah.
I mean, they named names, and my take on this is this was just I don't want to split people here, but a failed experiment, I will say. Most of these folks were just trying to get by. The tavern operators were trying to sell it because people wanted it. There was a demand. The manufacturers, for a lot of the farmers, it was another product. So there's a romance to it for me, and so I do name the taverns that got busted and all these places, and I make it clear in the book. I'm not judging, but in some ways, I think people will be like, oh, that was my great-grandfather. I hope it's entertaining and like a badge of honor in some ways, not a, oh my God, they were arrested. Well, they were arrested for making moonshine.
Shame on my family, yeah.
Right, like that damn Miazga, So the moonshine I really liked writing, the fast pitch tournament, the street names, I learned so much. One of the things I loved is, although I always identify it in a newspaper article, because Rhinelander's so rich in natural beauty and scenery and history. So many of the streets have that history in their names, Sumac Trail and Hemlock Street, Spruce Street, Balsam Street, all of those types of streets. That was fascinating. And the other cool thing about writing this is I found so many cool tie-ins. So I found one woman, a mother in a household on the west side, who is arrested for making moonshine. And I thought, well, good on her. I mean, women and men trying to get ahead, good for her. She's ahead of her time. And then her son ends up on the city council and the county board and is influential in getting West Side Park built. So you see a lot of these families, oh no, they were charged on something and then they went on to serve their country, right? And came back and joined the Lions Club or coached Little League. These are really good people, and they were just living through a phase of history. But I found that in at least 2 or 3 other places too, where someone who was influential, maybe gets a street named after them that you didn't know also did this other thing. It's just really fun, and it's a small enough community where some of the descendants today, and some of them don't even know these stories. I mean, I talked to somebody about the building of West Side Park, and I was like, oh, can I get a picture of your father? He was very instrumental. And she said, he was? Because they didn't go, except for me, I'm kind of a political geek, but I don't think most people in government came home and talked about zoning issues at the dinner table, or, well, they're looking at putting a sewer at the corner of Highview and Pelican, and I don't know if that's the best policy. What 8-year-old kid, even if that gets said, is going to be like, cool, sewers and sidewalks and potholes, right? I was one of the few, but most people were like, but then as you get older, you realize the importance of things like good roads, right? And clean air and clean water and so forth. So yeah, I got to thank Bill a lot. And I don't want to say it was easy, but with the exception of, you have to put in a little money when it comes time to, pay someone to design it and print it. I made my money back with the first 2 books, and that's all I ever wanted to do. With this one, I was a little nervous because I wasn't sure with, some of the economics afloat that it would sell as well. But I've been pleasantly surprised. I think I've got orders for about 65 books right now. And yeah, as my dad always said, to each his own. That was one of my favorite quotes. And I've met people who have really unique hobbies. And, one of my best friends does a lot of mushroom hunting. And then he puts them on pizzas and he does all this other stuff. And he's got all these books on mushrooms and stuff. I get it. He loves it. And again, he is comfortable in his own skin and his hobbies. And I always say those are the people, if I have to be stranded on an island, I don't want it to be somebody exactly like me. One of my neighbors, where I live, it's a lot of people who work at the university and state government. My favorite guy is he's an ex-biker. He's got tattoos up and down, and his stories are amazing. He used to hobo around the country in the 60s, and I always tell him when we're walking the dogs and I see him at 8 at night, and all of a sudden it's 9:30 and his wife's texting, where the hell are you? If I have to be stranded, I want to be with him, just because it's something different. It enriches your life. You get to know people. It's a big world. It's a big community. And same thing. It doesn't matter the size of the community. There's people out there with stories to tell. And I kind of think it's my gift, if you will, to gather them, and because that's what I know how to do. I do research at the university. I know my way around libraries and resources, and how to get the data together, how to query the data, and now with the help of Kurt and Hodag Press, I know how to get it in print so I can sell it. And thankfully, the good retailers of Rhinelander have seen fit to purchase a few copies so I can get it in people's hands, which is nice. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's how I got to the 3rd book. Bill helped, Kurt helped. Of course, Kerry Bladorn was an asset, talking to him now and then. My sister was also a good inspiration, as I've always been active in community. So I was the moderator of our church for a while. I was on our council. And then after I was moderator, I was burnt out. I was like, oh my God, because we were talking about merging with another church, and that's very bureaucratic. It's the opposite of what you find, hopefully, in a church is spirituality and acceptance, or in the woods. A lot of people find that there, or in, American Indian spirituality. I'm a big fan. Finding your morality, however the heck you find it, as long as you find it. And how did I get on that? From my sister. Oh, I was trying to find something to do with my time.
Yeah.
And for a year, I really didn't do much but enjoy life. Watched a lot of documentaries, spent a lot of time just hanging out. But even that, you know, you get done with work at 4 on a Friday and you're not going back till 8 Saturday. There's only so many movies you can watch with your wife or your partner or whatever. You know, it's like I need to fill in my time with something that inspires me. So Donna inspired me, and Bill, and now the book's out. Well, it's sitting with someone who's doing the typesetting and working on the cover. I hope to have it in print in 2 weeks, and then I'll be back. I'll be dropping them off at Kids Corner and the Hodag Store and Pioneer Park Historical Complex. I'll be contacting historical societies and libraries and such to see if
Stop by
they'll
here
pick
too.
one up. I will.
Okay.
Thank you. You know, this is the fun part. I can get back to town, and I think in a year, typically it takes about a year or two before I break even. And my challenge now will be wanting to do the research for something else, but this is, you know, you have to invest. It might not seem like a lot of money to some people, but I just finished paying my student loans off 3 years ago, so I'm still in a very frugal, you know, parents were Depression era, and okay, fine, I know I'm going to put this money out, I'm going to make it back, but I don't want to rush another one out too quickly because I don't want to spend that kind of money. But I'm hoping to spend this next winter pursuing some kind of a project on Rhinelander. I just don't know what it will be. So, yeah, that's the third book. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I feel really blessed to have grown up here and to still be able to be a part of the community. I'm a little jealous, I have to admit. The last few years I've seen so many champions for this community, like you and Carrie and the gentleman that owns the art studio downtown. I can't remember his name. There's a lot of people doing a lot of community good. I always thought as a kid that would be me as part of that, and now I feel like I get to be. But if I don't keep writing, then I kind of, it's almost like watching it all happen and go, I want to be a part of that. And then I'll get to be a part of it for a while. And yeah, it's a great community, and I'm really thankful for everything people do up here. Yeah.
Thanks for checking out If These Woods Could Talk, produced by the Rhinelander District Library. Tales of the Northwoods Volume 3 will be released on Friday, September 19th. You can find a copy at the Hodag Store or by going online to hodagpress.com. And to find out how to record your own story, reach out to the Rhinelander District Library.